From the shadowy forests of the Ozarks to the forgotten hollers tucked deep in the heart of Arkansas, the strange has always had a way of finding the quiet places. But these stories, they don't just live in the past. They echo, they linger, and sometimes they return louder than ever. This is the Supernatural Roundtable, a place for stories, for questions, and for those who walk the line between the known and the unknown. Tonight, your hosts are Craig and Richard, believers, chasers of truth, and men who've heard just enough to know there's more out there than meets the eye. They aren't here to convince you, just to share what's been seen, and maybe what's still watching from the tree line. So pull up a chair. The night's just getting started, and your seat's been waiting.
Do you know what real fear is? Have you ever felt the primal surge of adrenaline tearing through your veins? Like your body knows something's wrong before your mind can name it. In July 1924, 5 men on a remote mining claim along Mount St. Helens came face to face with the unknown. For hours to the dead of night, something battered their small wooden cabin, unrelenting, unseen, inhuman. When the dawn finally broke over the trees, the men emerged, shaken, changed. They had felt that fear, the kind that doesn't leave. Join us as we descend into the night they never forgot. The siege at Ape Canyon. Hello everyone, welcome to the Supernatural Roundtable. Today we are diving into one of the biggest, I guess you could say, spots of lore in the Bigfoot mythology. Honestly,
it's one of the really first ones.
I would say so. Definitely one of the most notable. It's
Right.
You've got a little bit of everything in this, and I'm not saying Bigfoot's not real with when I say the mythology. But the Siege of Ape Canyon, as I put it, the story of the 5 miners that were, at the time, they had a mining claim on Mount St. Helens in this valley or canyon or whatever you want to call it. And they were eventually driven off by a group of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them. And we're going to get into that today. We're also going to talk... there's been a couple of odd disappearances in the Mount St. Helens area. Of course, Mount St. Helens is also notable for the eruption, and apparently, rumor has it that bodies were recovered after the eruption. How true that is, don't know. Just like with this, we don't have any picture evidence, and actually for the longest time, there was no cabin evidence, but I believe in 2013 they found the cabin finally.
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Yeah, with historical evidence and stuff marking that these men had actually been there. So we're going to dive into that today and talk about it. And, well, let's get on into it, Craig.
You betcha. Well, of course, Ape Canyon story, it's one of the most famous legends in the Pacific Northwest folklore. It's a kind of a strange mix of wilderness adventure, fear, and mystery all thrown into one, that helped shape Bigfoot mythology. Um, of course, the attack, it happened in 1924. A narrow Ape Canyon, which was a narrow gorge on the southeast shoulder of Mount St. Helens. Of course, the group of 5 miners that was and prospectors were Fred Beck, Gabe Lefevre,
Lefebvre, I
John
believe, yeah.
John Peterson, Marion Smith, and Roy Smith, which was Marion's brother.
I've
And
got it that was his son, but I don't know.
yeah, well, I don't know. It may have been.
Relation.
Yeah. They was working a gold claim in the wilderness that was several miles from the nearest town of Kelso. And of course, everything started off, for several days, they had unusual footprints, strange whistling calls. They kept seeing movement in the trees. And at first, they just dismissed these signs as tricks of the wilderness until one evening Marion Smith reportedly shot at a large hairy creature that was watching them from a nearby ridge.
Hmm.
And the figure toppled over the cliff and disappeared into the ravine.
See, I've got a slightly different version of that story, but it is also worth noting that the miners had been in that area at that point for 2 years when the trouble finally came to them. They had been having weird noises to the point it sounded like drum beats, as it was described. But they couldn't ever pinpoint the noises. They would feel like they were being watched. They would also find footprints. One notable example, they found footprints coming out of the stream there that they got their water from. But it was two perfect sets of footprints, but that was it. There was never any more footprints after that. It looked like just two steps, and then it was gone.
Right.
And then my info on it. See, I don't know. I've heard that version of events, and then I've heard this version of events where it was Marion, I believe, and then Beck. They were getting water because they are a little bit freaked out. And in fact, Marion, I think it was Beck that had a toothache at the time. And this gold claim was doing really well for these men. And they did not want to leave. And Beck I believe, had a toothache, and he told Marion that he wanted to go back to town. And Marion replied that he would have to go back by himself because neither God nor the devil was going to get him off that mountain. Boy, how wrong was he? But anyway, they're filling up their pails of water, and he takes a shot at this thing because this thing is watching him, I believe, at about 100 yards. And he misses and hits a tree. That's the version of events I heard. Do I know that? No. Because there's like multiple versions of the story.
Right. Then, of course, you get into the night attack after the shooting. The men, they literally barricaded themselves in their cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real terror began. And this is, I got, according to Fred Beck's later account, says around midnight, their cabin came under attack. Large, heavy rocks were hurled at the roof and the walls, shaking the small structure. The men heard loud, guttural screams outside and footsteps of several large creatures moving around them. They claimed the attackers tried to break through the walls, even reaching an arm through a gap between the logs, which one miner struck it with an axe, and the group spent the rest of the night firing their rifles through cracks and gaps, terrified and exhausted. And the attack apparently lasted until dawn,
Mm-hmm.
when the creatures finally disappeared back into the forest. So that'd be a hell of an experience.
Yeah, of course, it's also notable that these things were called mountain devils. That's what they were known as, including by local legend, mountain devils.
Right.
And the miners did fire back, but apparently only fired back in self-defense. So, like, hey, we're just defending ourselves. They didn't want to escalate further if they could help it. But could you imagine? This is a one-room cabin.
Right. All that's in there is some bunk beds and,
Mm-hmm.
and a stove for heat. And
Yeah, it's not much. So it's yeah, they dust was falling from the rafters with each impact. Yeah. So, fearing the roof might cave in, Beck and Marion raised their rifles and blasted several shots through the ceiling. The roar of gunfire inside the cabin was deafening. With a screech, the creature on the roof leapt off the ground, thudding onto the porch. So that gives you an idea of like what they were going through in those moments.
Well, yeah, and I'm just curious. How big were these rocks that they was throwing?
I've heard
Uh,
reports of smaller pebbles. I've heard reports there were some bigger rocks mixed in, and then some
right.
pretty nice sized chunk of rocks too.
Yeah, and of course, you got the strength of these creatures. They're just ungodly.
And here's my take on the whole thing. I think if they had wanted to really break in there and get them, they would have. I think this was a calculated effort to push the miners out of the area after a show of aggression by them.
Hey, that's a good point. And they're a lot smarter than what anybody think they are. Uh, they resemble a human so much. And who's to say just how smart they really are?
Oh, you're right, for sure. Um, I do. Here's one thing that did happen. Of course, while they were attacking the cabin, a hairy arm had burst through a chinking gap in the wall and was groping around on the inside of the cabin. And as it was swiping blindly, it managed to grab a handle of an axe that was leaning up against the wall. Thinking quickly and probably in a panic, Beck lunged at the axe, seized the axe head, and he turned it sideways so the creature couldn't get it out. So the creature's doing this, trying to pull it out instead of pulling it out sideways. Could you imagine how terrifying that would be?
Oh yeah, can you imagine a Bigfoot with an axe? Yeah, that. You definitely that's definitely a nightmare right there.
Yeah, at this point, Marion Smith swung his rifle toward the opening, fired at the arm, which was withdrawn with a horrid shriek, dropping the axe back. Enraged by the gunshot, the creatures renewed their assault with fury. For 5 long hours, the cabin and its occupants were under siege. So, yeah, again and again, heavy stones pounded the wall, fists slammed on the door, and the prospectors fired intermittently through the dark. But they don't know if they ever got one. Marion Smith raised his voice over the din, and in a quavering, sing-song like voice, he began shouting, "If you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, and we'll go home in the morning." And he was singing this.
Well, apparently, in 1967, Fred Beck, he published a pamphlet titled "I Fought the Ape Man at Mount St. Helens." And
Yeah.
of course, in it, he reaffirmed his story a little bit by adding a spiritual dimension and claiming that the creatures were not physical but possibly interdimensional or psychic manifestations connected to the fourth dimension. I
Well,
don't know. I don't know where he got all that, but
well, what's really weird is Beck claimed to be clairvoyant.
oh, I did
But
not know that.
before this, yeah, this is something I came up across in my research. Um, Ironically, let's see, the mine is named that they found and stuck a claim on. He claims he came across it on a vision at Spirit Lake, which Spirit Lake is right there um, by Mount St. Helens, and he said the spirit of a Native American spiritual entity called Vander White or something like that came to him and told him that they would find gold, but the gold did not belong to them. So, which was interesting in and of itself, and so they called it the Vander White Mine. It actually was a point of contention between him and Marion Smith because Marion Smith was definitely not into the whole thing, but then they did find gold, which was really strange. But he was into the whole spiritual, awakening, spiritual stuff, believing in clairvoyancy and believing that these were spiritual creatures and not just a flesh and blood creature.
Well, whether or not the story is true or not, for someone to come up with a story like this,
It's wild.
yeah, it's wild. I mean, makes you wonder about it all.
A little bit. And I mean, of course, the story does continue. Of course, this goes on all night. Now, here's where your story and my story kind of converge. Because you talked about them shooting one and it falling into a ravine.
Right.
Yeah, well, in the morning, they are leaving. The creatures have left. And as they're leaving, they come across one just standing there at the edge, the lip of Ape Canyon, as it falls in, into Ape Canyon. And I believe Marion Smith shoots it, and it tumbles off the edge and into Ape Canyon. And then they leave. And nothing happens to them. But they never return.
Hmm.
So that's where our stories really intersect right there. So I don't know which one is true.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. I mean, there's so much speculation and everything.
Well, here's something else. They hastily gathered only their most precious belongings and left over $200 worth of equipment, which in 1924, $200 worth of equipment is worth, I believe, about $3,000 worth of stuff.
Right, that would be
A significant investment for
no doubt,
a couple of miners
no doubt about
to
it.
never return.
Makes you wonder, where the Bigfoot defending the area for the gold, or was they defending it because it was their territory?
I think the miners showed aggression first and they were spotted in kind.
Yeah, that's that seems to be the logical explanation for it.
Yeah, the Bedraggle miners half ran down the trail from their high camp, traveling most of the day until they reached safety of the Forest Ranger station at Spirit Lake, which is, I believe, Spirit Lake is 23 miles. Because that also comes into play later. Because according to some hoaxing, I'm using air quotes for a reason. Because some local Boy Scouts claimed that they were throwing rocks off the edge into the ravine and hitting the cabin. But that's 23 miles over rugged terrain. And they said they were leaving their camp at night and making it back the same day. That's no.
Well, I heard something similar. On my version is it was they just called them teenagers from a nearby camp
Mm-hmm.
had been playing pranks.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that because these are dedicated outdoorsmen and it took a full day traveling at breakneck speed to get back in daylight. Now you're telling me that a group of teenagers or kids is going to travel across country on Mount St. Helens in the dead of night to go prank a couple miners in the middle of nowhere to do this?
And of course, some skeptics claim that that the rock throwing was landslides and falling debris. I don't know the area, and I couldn't say that couldn't be fact or not, but
Well, if it was landslide, wouldn't it have just knocked out the whole cabin?
I would have thought so. In my opinion, and of course, this whole story, for them to come up with something like this, how could it possibly be a landslide or falling debris?
Yeah, because the landslide is just, that's wild.
Yeah, that was one of the skeptical explanations.
Of course, I mean, coming up with an idea of hairy 7'8" men attacked me on Mount St. Helens is also, that's very wild. But I mean, if you're going to come up with a story, why not something believable? This was a mine that was producing for these men. They were making good money off of this mine. They abandoned it the next day, leaving behind a decent amount of equipment that set them back significantly. That is a substantial dollar amount of equipment they left behind. They left behind a good paying mine. Why would you do that?
Exactly. I'm just curious, does the mine exist today? Did you ever find out any of that?
I believe they have found it. A part of it
Because it says part of it was Ape Canyon was destroyed by the lava
eruption
flow.
of Mount St. Helens, yes. But they're pretty sure they found it and the cabin itself. But we'll get to that.
Right.
Of course, the men also, when they got back to civilization, they agreed they were not going to speak to this about to anyone. And someone immediately broke that. No one knows who did it. But someone went to the papers, and I mean, you started seeing headlines like on July 12th, 1924, the Longview Daily News ran a headline: Kelso miners back would tell of mountain devils. The following day, the Washington and Oregon pounced on the story and splashed it across the front of their headline. So everything from ape men, gorilla men, mountain apes fight with big apes reported by miners, gorilla men terrorize gold claim, mountain devils bombard prospectors' cabins. The story was so fantastic that it quickly spread beyond local area, and as Fred Beck later noted, the famous incident of 1924 was soon being written about in newspapers throughout Washington and Oregon, and eventually picked up on wire by nationwide.
Right. And of course, this all led to the rise of the Bigfoot legend in the mid 20th century. And then the beings became associated with Sasquatch.
It definitely helped. I mean, that and then Bluff Creek helped too.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Yeah. It's kind of nutty, so. But, I mean, curiosity seekers and all that would head up to Kelso and into Mount St. Helens. There's also pictures of newspapers claiming that it is the miners there in their cabin and all that. They're all fake pictures that the newspapers and journalists actually faked to get headlines. They also,
of course,
yeah, fake news is a thing from way back even then. But there were fake footprints that journalists made, all kinds of stuff to write a headline with this story. One optimistic reporter declared, if there are 8 men on Mount St. Helens, they'll be found in the next few days. Yeah, so. The frenzy was later remembered as the Great Ape Hunt of 1924. One eager hunter even carried an elephant gun prepared to take down the giant beast. While rumors circulated of an English adventurer sailing to Washington to join the chase. So this really did stir up nationwide fervor. Kind of like what the Falcon Monster did in Arkansas during the 70s.
Right.
It's very comparable. I mean, you could almost consider it going viral at the time.
And, I actually found an interesting story that's, tied in the same year of that, the cabin attack. Uh, it was apparently it's Clark County, which is oh part of it is part of Vancouver and all them places. But anyway, it's near Mount St. Helens apparently. Um, but these these prunarians, as they called them, um, they was set to build to have a super picnic, and they wanted a real good attraction. Well, they've been hearing about these mountain devils or wild men. Some even called them long-eared gorillas.
Hmm.
Uh, Numerous sightings have been reported, and anyway, they took, as they said, two noted Nimrods, County Assessor Chester Palmer and Ralph Dixon, were selected by the Prenarians to search out this elusive creature and bring him back for the exhibit, dead or alive. This quest, of course, sparked a lively debate as to the veracity of the creature's existence, and after several days of hunting in the Spirit Lake region, the two hunters found little to no nothing. They found some cougar tracks. The Prenarians' big August picnic would have to do without their big, long-eared gorilla. Uh, the final word on the existence of the elusive Mount St. Helens creature ran on the front page of the Evening Columbian on July 18th under the headline, Local Jurist Solves Mystery of the Wild Man. Those purported gorillas or ape men who are causing such a consternation, Superior Court Judge George B. Simpson declared, are no more than returning delegates from the recent Democratic convention in New York City who have become lost and are now vainly endeavoring to find their way out of the wilderness.
What the
that
hell?
that that's what he said.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
actually a statement.
Oh my gosh.
And it goes on to say, even without hope for its main attraction, the Prenarians' picnic in the park that August proved to be a huge success. And later, the fall of the Democratic presidential candidate of John Davis, Calvin Coolidge, and other Republicans swept the Washington general election.
Oh my gosh.
Ain't that something? A little political got thrown in there.
Thrown into a Bigfoot. How that's hilarious.
Yeah, I thought that'd be good to throw that in.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Anyway, as far as the minor, the only ones that ever really the first written accounts, the only one they ever published anything was Fred Beck. So
Right.
the rest of them never did. In fact, most of their children or grandchildren didn't even know this story, which they didn't find out till much later when people investigating the cabin incident and all that got in contact with the family, trying to find out more information over where the possible cabin could be. So there's that, which is wild in of itself. But Beck did, as you say, publish that book, I Fought the Ape Man on Mount St. Helens.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, there's been some strange disappearances there on Mount St. Helens as well. I figure it might be a good time to get into that too.
Yeah. One, Maureen Kelly. This was in. I get this was probably one of the most recent. It was in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, She went out in the forest on what was described as a spiritual quest, and she was last seen or known to cross Canyon Creek and head toward Forest Service Road 54. No body recovered until possibly remains in 2024, but not yet confirmed to be hers. I don't know. I couldn't find any more info on that.
Well, you're probably not going to find one on oh on an open case.
Right.
That's just not the way it works. You usually don't.
But I think the most the best one would be the Jim Carter or Joe Carter.
I've got it listed as Jim Carter,
Jim Carter. Okay, I got both. They're calling him Jim or Joe Carter.
which is weird.
Yeah.
It's like and it is listed as a Bigfoot related disappearance for whatever reason, possibly. Of course, we also did talk about the eruption of Mount St. Helens and Ape Canyon. We'll get more into that. I'm digressing. Okay, Jim Carter disappeared in 1950. And he was 32 years of age at the time. Who Jim Carter was, he was a member of the Seattle Mountain Rescue Council who had summited the 9,677-foot volcano with a large group of fellow climbers. He was an accomplished skier, accomplished outdoorsman, photographer. The man knew what he was doing in the wild. So this was not a novice in his craft, trade, whatever you want to call it. He knew what he was doing in the wilderness.
And you know what's kind of unique about this is it also happened near the Ape Canyon.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Okay, so let's see. May 21st, 1950, the team of about 20, mostly from Seattle, was descending the mountain on skis in the early afternoon near a feature called Dog's Head at roughly 8,000 feet of elevation. Carter told his companions that he would speed ahead, set up a camera, and photograph the others as they skied down towards the timber. The weather was clear, the snow conditions were good, and Carter skied off on his own. And unfortunately, he was never seen again. When the other team members reached the timberline and did not find Carter waiting with a camera, they became concerned. They discovered no sign of him except the empty film box in the snow near Dog's Head, presumably where he took his last intended photograph. What they did find were Carter's skis, and these immediately alarmed searchers. The tracks indicated that Carter had suddenly turned downhill and bolted away at a reckless pace. It looked as if he had launched into a wild, death-defying ski run, according to one of the searchers. I can't recall his name. And this man was a experienced skier. He wouldn't just do this. This is not something an experienced skier just goes off and does. He was going straight down the mountain side, far faster and more daring than an expert of his caliber would normally attempt. His tracks went straight down into the steep gorge of Ape Canyon, which, as we talked about it, into a hazardous area of cliffs and crevasses. Witnesses said that Carter's ski route showed he even jumped over 2 or 3 large crevasses in his path. Feats no skier of his caliber would take unless something was terribly wrong or he was being pursued, as one rescuer later put it. In other words, Carter appeared to be fleeing in terror, and one member of the search team, Dr. Bob Lee of Portland, reported he was going like the devil, jumping crevasses as if frightened of something. A massive search operation was launched the same day. Over the next week, dozens of volunteers and searchers from Mount St. Helens ranger personnel combed Ape Canyon and the surrounding forest. Pretty much where he should have been, he was not.
Question being is, though, I mean, they said that this was connected to Bigfoot.
Hmm.
My question is did they find any evidence like footprints or anything?
No.
So I just wonder how they, connected it to Bigfoot.
I'm thinking stories, but there is more to it. That
Well, I think a lot of it is, no matter what, you're never told the entire story.
right.
And I think even back then, people were left out details of what actually happened on things.
Well, I remember. I'll get to that here in a second. Over the next week, dozens of volunteers, over 75 people, for over 2 weeks, searched the ground and aerial. Tracks believed to have been Carter's ski prints were followed down the canyon's steep wall. Incredibly, he had managed to zigzag to the canyon floor, but there the trail stopped. Searchers expected to find Carter's injured or worse dead body at the bottom of Ape Canyon, but no body was found. Adding to the mystery, a pilot flying over spotted what looked like ski tracks continue beyond Ape Canyon, headed northeast towards the deep woods of the Muddy River Eagle Creek area, after which the tracks vanished into the trackless wilderness. It was as if Carter had skied into Ape Canyon, then simply disappeared into thin air. Despite extensive searching, not a single piece of Carter's equipment or clothing was ever found. After 2 weeks of fruitless searching, the official search was called off. Carter is still missing to this day, 75 years later. Carter's fate remains unknown. Um,
I'm just curious. It says his film box was found. I wonder if anything was on it.
no, his camera was never recovered. The baffling disappearance likely would have faded into local infamy if it were not for some curious statements. Here's where I'm getting at right now, Craig. Made by some of the Carter searchers. Bob Lee, the Seattle Mountain Rescue veteran who had helped lead the search, was deeply struck by the experience. He later described it as the most eerie experience I have ever had. Every so often during the search, Lee found himself separated from the rest of the team in the silent, dense forest. In those moments, he developed an uncanny feeling that somebody was watching me. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. It was eerie. I was unarmed except for my ice axe. And believe me, I never let that go. Lee had climbed in the Himalayas and had led rescue missions on Rainier, and yet he said the Ape Canyon search gave him chills like nothing else had. Another rescuer, Dr. Otto Trott, concurred that the men privately joked, or perhaps half believed, that the apes got him. They, in fact, told reporters that the apes of Ape Canyon got him. So, Otrock, Lee Stark, and I finally came to the conclusion that the apes got him. Yeah, they told reporters that. It is important to note that no definitive evidence of ape-man attack on Carter was ever found. But also, if there was a body of Carter, that was also likely destroyed in the eruption of Mount St. Helens.
Right.
But it's definitely one of the most baffling disappearances on the mountain itself. And he was also a diabetic, so him just going off into the wilderness would not have just happened. He was an experienced outdoorsman. He had one shot of insulin on him, so he wouldn't have just gone off into the wilderness. And like you said, the Maureen Kelly spiritual quest in 2013. That one's very strange.
Well, there's a few things. I found something. Two hunters who vanished near Total. I guess that's how you say it. Toutle in the 1960s, and it retold in local oral stories, but no matching newspaper record had ever confirmed that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, when they're that far back, I mean, I don't know how good the record keeping was back then.
Right. Well, I mean, as far as like you're missing 411 and all that, you look it up, and it even tells you that they didn't keep a good record
Mm.
during that time period. So, what can you do?
There's a lot of people that go missing. They never find signs of them.
Exactly.
That happens a lot of times. There's also the Native American lore behind it. The idea of mountain devils or rogue wild men in the Cascades have long predated the miners in 1924. Early settlers' records in Washington and indigenous oral history speak of Sasquatch or similar beings, often hairy, large, wild people who lived in the forest, while some anthropologists think these stories refer to human hermits or symbolic spirits. Bigfoot enthusiasts consider them early documentation of Sasquatch, which we do. I mean, me and you, we've done this channel for almost a year now, and everywhere we turn when we're looking at Bigfoot stuff, they always come up in local traditions of giant hairy ape men go way back even before the time of Christ.
Yeah, I mean, we dove into it pretty good on our very first episode, and I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
research that goes so far back, and it's not in just North America either.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just kind of nuts. And of course, there's also the rumors that when Mount St. Helens blew, which was probably one of the most devastating natural disasters in United States history, there was apparently rumors of Sasquatch bodies recovered on the mountain itself. Now, I mean, we can't verify that. I don't know how much we can even say that's true.
And I kind of found this little tidbit, and whether or not it's true, during the 1980 eruption, witnesses claim to have seen strange lights above the ash plume, and later attributed it to lightning and atmospheric effects. But a lot of people think it might have been UFOs.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just all I do know is they were from what I understand of the tale, they were gathering up the dead animals, which I don't know if they do that during an eruption or after eruption. I don't know what takes place. I guess I should have studied that more. But they were putting them under tarps and stuff, and one of the tarps was lifted up, and one of the locals seen there was a whole bunch of burnt and dead Sasquatch, and he was told pretty much to shut up about it.
I heard a similar kind of a similar story. Actually, it was on a documentary. They said that they actually found some live ones
Mm-hmm.
that
I
were
heard that
up
too.
there, and then these so-called men in black showed up and told the people who found these, you know, wounded live Bigfoot, uh, pretty much told them to get off the mountain and to never speak of it again.
Yeah.
I've heard so many different stories about that. And uh, there was one documentary I watched. It was a game and fish person that worked over there at Mount St. Helens, and he was confronted by men in black that told him if he ever spoke of it again that he would pretty much disappear.
Hmm.
Whether or not that's true, on the documentary, of course they had the guy all blurred out. You couldn't see who it was.
I hate those.
I know it. So I mean,
I mean,
whoever it was definitely scared to even show their face,
scared or playing into it, maybe.
or playing into it. Right.
I just don't know. I mean, but I mean, it's not the first time we've heard of people, that heard of Men in Black when it comes to the subject of Bigfoot. It seems to always be a thing we hear about.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I've heard
Eh,
about it in the case here, even in Oklahoma. What is it, Hanobia, I believe it was.
I heard something real. It's real good. You know the bear attacks that they were having up in North Arkansas.
Yeah.
Well, I watched a video. Me and your grandpa, we watched a video, and this guy on here claimed that it wasn't a bear, that it was a group of dogmen, and that the government come up there and they trapped them in a cave and supposedly shot them and killed them.
Hmm.
Whether or not that's true, like I said, you can't trust everything you hear. That's YouTube for you, you know.
That is really strange. I
Yeah,
mean, there are dogman sightings all over the place, so.
yeah.
But why would they start mauling people around here?
Well, yeah, but you think about it. Then bear attacks. You've been bear hunting before. What happens when a bear sees you?
They run.
Yeah, they run like a scalded dog. Yeah.
This ain't the West Coast.
And even I don't know the chances of a bear attacks, and especially a few weeks apart. It just don't make sense to me. I think there's a cover up there.
Yeah, that was really strange too. Black bears don't normally attack people anyway. I think there's
Right.
only been 13 fatalities in the United States. Period. I might be wrong on that. Someone can
Yeah.
fact check me. I don't know. But all of a sudden, having two fatal black bear attacks in the span of 2 weeks in one state.
Right. And just to a couple of counties apart.
Hmm. And in a state that's very heavy in natural resources, wildlife, and food. And not in the middle of a drought. I mean, up in northwest Arkansas, there's plenty of water and food. So that was awful fishy. And then you came across that story up in Fayetteville about a man that had been squeezed to death, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was weird. And anyway, another one thing before we close out this episode that I was really wanting to get into. We talked about, of course, the Mount St. Helens. Of course, Ape Canyon was partially destroyed during the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. So it was believed that the cabin was completely gone, that they were never going to find it. Well, I believe it was in 2013 that they rediscovered the canyon. Yeah. Ape Canyon's legacy has been enriched by newly unearthed historical records and old documents and first-person narratives that have been overlooked. Mark Myersell, I think I'm spelling that right, spent countless hours scouring newspaper archives, county records, mining claim filings, and state historical societies. He managed to track down primary sources from 1924, including original newspaper reports like the Oregonian article from 1916, or not July 16, 1924, that first broke the story, hand-drawn maps, claim certifications, vendor white mining claim, and even quirky items like editorial cartoons about ape men. These materials shed light on how the incident was reported and perceived in its own time. Beyond that, one fascinating find was the local Cowlitz and local tribes already had lore on the hairy men, which we covered. his research even turned up a woven basket, native basket, that had incorporated an image of a big ape-like figure on it. Essentially a folkloric Bigfoot depiction in traditional art. This suggests as the Mountain Devil's legend existed in native culture well before 1924. In 2019, he compiled the best of these historical nuggets into a limited edition book titled Mountain Devil, the 1924 Attack on Ape Canyon. Let's see. The self-published book impressively won the Washington State Library contest in 2019, attesting to its quality and research. Crucially, some first-hand testimonies have resurfaced, including Fred Beck's own voice from beyond the grave. In 2016, the Sasquatch Archives released an audio of Roger Patterson's 1966 interview with Fred Beck. See, I didn't know he had interviewed him. Roger Patterson of Patterson and Gimlin fame, the one that captured the Patty footage, actually went and interviewed Fred Beck.
That is something.
That's some wild crossover history right there, ain't it? Which, incidentally, had been in John Green's custody, which that's another famous Bigfoot researcher from one of the first. He described the creatures in the harrowing overnight siege, providing a rare direct account from one of the men involved. The significance, because of Beck's known published account, his 1967 booklet was heavily colored by his later spiritual beliefs, but hearing him in 1966, closer to the events, offered a slightly different perspective. The audio is a bit rough. Even Green lamented its quality in a letter back. But for researchers, it's golden, lost footage of the original witness, and has mentioned that Roger Patterson interviewed other old-timers like Marion Smith. Finally, the miners' families added their voices. Descendants of Marion and Roy Smith participated in the recent documentary project. Thanks to these family interviews, we know that some of the wilder rumors, like the miners allegedly committing suicide due to a lifelong trauma, were unfounded, and the real men lived out normal lives. The kind of insight only surface when you research. But the bad thing about it, the cabin was lost to time for the longest time, especially after Mount St. Helens. And of course, the Forest Service also investigated the story and found the cabin battered with rocks strewn about, but no hard proof of the 8 men. So, but I believe it was 2013. I'm trying to find it here in my notes. Where's my notes? Oh my gosh, I just had it. But anyway, the same people that have been doing all this research finally tracked down the cabin. And they believe the mining claim as well. In years since 2013, yeah. So they even managed to track down the remnants of the cabin. They found even some old equipment that was still around from it. They've mapped out the layout and the perimeter of the cabin, and they believe they've even found the original mining claim itself. Even though the area is vastly different, and from what I understand, it's now on a slope. So it's super dangerous. One of the family members even got hurt going with them trying to get down to this thing.
Wow. That's crazy.
But at least it's been found.
I just want to this is kind of a backtrack on the bear thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was wanting to read a quote. Of course, them bear attacks was the first reported bear attacks in Arkansas in at least 25 years. But it goes on to say that the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture says that a person is 180 times more likely to die from a bee sting, or 160,000 times more likely to die in a traffic accident than to die from a bear attack.
That's crazy.
Ain't that something? I just wanted to throw that in.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a backtrack on that.
You're good. Far from being a closed case, the Ape Canyon incident continues to evolve with new information. In the years since 2013, diligent research has peeled back layers of myth, grounding the legend in real artifacts and records. We've gained fresh perspectives from the miner's own descendants and even long lost voice of Fred Beck himself. At the same time, the mystery has proven resilient, spawning new theories and creative retellings that keep the debate alive. Whether one leans toward the flesh and blood Bigfoot encounter, a hoax, or a misunderstanding, or something otherworldly, the Ape Canyon story offers plenty to ponder. What's clear is this 100-year-old tale still captures our imagination. It sits in the intersection of history and folklore, and now bolstered by both cutting-edge research and passionate storytelling for the curious reader or viewer, there's a rich trove of material to explore, from scholarly articles, Zen pages filled with century-old newsprints, to cinematic recreations of the fateful night. The Ape Canyon incident is no longer just a campfire story. It has become a case study in how legends endure and evolve. As new expeditions set out with GPS and cameras in hand, we can expect Ape Canyon to continue yielding surprises. Each retelling, be it a documentary, a podcast, or article, adds to the legacy of a truly iconic encounter, and who knows, perhaps the next discovery up in those cliffs will finally solve the mystery once and for all. And this is my own words. In my opinion, the attack at Ape Canyon was provoked by the people in the cabin. If you look at the events leading up to the attack, none of the actions had been inherently hostile to that point. Stalking and observation, sounds in the distance, nothing compared to the night after the creatures had shot off into the canyon. The attack itself shows the display of intelligence and even discipline. It was not a wild animal attack with creatures frothing at the mouth. It was calculated, and it could have been deadly if the creatures had wished it. I believe it was a warning, and had the miners not heeded said warning, then the attacks would have escalated. Ape Canyon remains a strange case, with multiple disappearances and possible bodies recovered after the eruption of Mount St. Helens. It is a place where legends don't just live, they linger and evolve, and maybe, just maybe, warn. With the rediscovery of a cabin, perhaps that legend is grounded in a little bit more reality than some people thought.
No doubt. And, to this day, I was reading that, they still have sightings in that general area.
Yeah, they do.
So.
I mean, the ecosystem is recovered from the disaster, so I would figure that they would come back too.
Right.
Well, Craig, that's all I got. If you want to go ahead and let the folks in on our next episode.
All right. We're going to dive into something we ain't dove into before. We're going to talk about witches. And, of course, the main one we'll be discussing will be the Bell Witch.
Mm-hmm.
Which that was it's a pretty interesting story, and we may even dive into a little bit of the witch trials, and but we're hoping to bring you a good show.
Yep.
And I'd like to give a shout out to Sean and Crystal Vines. They do might as well say they're the sister podcast to us.
Mm-hmm.
Paranormal Adventures. You can catch that on Spotify, Podbean, several others. I can't remember them all, but anyway, if you'd like to see and check them out, go right ahead. And also, I'd like to thank everybody for subscribing to us and helping us out, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we've grown by leaps and bounds. It's kind of crazy how much we've grown in a year. I didn't expect this, so I would like to give a shout out to Spirited Investigations because they're awesome. They're always leaving comments. Love you guys. And
Yes.
Oklahoma Cryptid Search Team, they're awesome too. Love y'all guys too. So,
And if y'all ever want to, get with us or become a guest or tell your story to us, our email is,
supernaturalroundtable@gmail.com.
or you can do mail to Sean and Crystal at paranormaladventures2@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. And that's all I got.
That's all I got.
Come back and see us.
Appreciate y'all.
Come back and see us for the next one. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
This is the Supernatural Roundtable, signing off for now. From haunted hollers to shadows in the pines, the strange is never too far from home. Until next time, keep your wits about you, and we'll meet again down the road.